Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th Annual Black PR History event. We're so happy that you all are here and we're ready for an amazing conversation with some great panelists and amazing hosts. And first, we're going to have our introduction with Carmela Glover of the Diversity Action Alliance.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Hello, everyone. I know we have attendees from many parts of the world, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to wherever you might be. I am Carmela Glover, as Kayla mentioned, president of the Diversity Action Alliance, head of DE&I at Page, and president of the New York chapter of Public Relations Society of America. And I am honored that Shelley Berry and the Museum of PR have asked me to welcome you to the 8th Annual Museum of Public Relations Black PR History event, Looking Beyond the Data. Before we jump into what will be a riveting, informative, and inspiring program, we must acknowledge that in 2023, nearly 50 years since the US federally recognized Black History Month, we are happy to finally celebrate historic firsts like Hakeem Jeffries and Wes Moore, and all who are part of the shift into a more inclusive future where Black leadership is normalized, and not an anomaly. We also recognize that a still flawed and imperfect system allows for powerful entities to extinguish the lives of innocent Black citizens like Tyre Nichols. And it parallels systems in many of our workplaces and institutions where there are power structures and inequitable policies that perpetuate the at-work marginalization of many, including Black professionals. Just yesterday, at the start of Black History Month, the College Board heavily diluted its new advanced placement course in African American Studies for high school students at the behest of a political leader who is determined to use his power to mute the stories of others. The revised curriculum is now devoid of content from important Black writers and academics, and it does allow instructors to opt out of covering the history being made today, like with the Black Lives Matter movement. Therefore, the opportunity we have this evening is not to just talk about the data and beyond, but to center those whose history it is to tell, and to leave with an action-driven inspiration to change our world in a way that only communicators can. The Museum of PR is vigilant about preserving the history of our profession in the most inclusive way. And so tonight's recorded, archived event symbolizes more than just a conversation and will be cemented in the history of PR. Thank you to those who made tonight possible. This 2023 Celebrating Black PR History program is underwritten by Amazon and is sponsored in part by the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications Department of Advertising and Public Relations at University of Georgia, the Diversity Action Alliance, the Stevens Group, and Compro. Tonight, you're going to hear from influential Black voices, starting with our MC, Deborah Hyman, and MSNBC political analyst, Michael Steele. We'll then walk through recent data and current studies regarding race and DE&I in the communications field, to which a panel of communications leaders will then react and respond. Following that, we'll have a fireside chat with CNN political analyst Bakari Sellers, and a second panel of leaders will share what actions we can take in support of advancing Black people in PR. We'll end this evening's program on a high note with a closing charge and call to action by industry legend Tarad Neptune, Chief Communications Officer at Medtronic. We'll hold all Q&A until the very end, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat, where you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of all panelists at the end. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage your hostess for tonight and a mentor to many of us, including myself, Deborah Hyman. Deborah is an award-winning global corporate communications executive who builds and supports innovative, collaborative, and purpose-driven cultures for Fortune 500 companies. Currently the SVP and head of employee communications and employer brand at Wells Fargo, many of you may also recognize Deborah for her leadership of the National Black Public Relations Society, where she is president emeritus. Welcome, Deborah. Enjoy the program.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Carmela. I'm honored to be here this evening. This is quite an honor and a privilege to be able to host such an event. What was important to me was that we have the discussion, but two, we get to solutions. I've been in this business for a long time and have been looking for those solutions and trying to be a part of the solution. But what I do know is that we're really just tired of talking about it, and we want to get to fix the problem. And the problem is that we don't have enough representation in the public relations field for Black practitioners. And we know that there are a multitude of problems. We can all talk about our own experiences of entering the field, surviving in the field, thriving in the field, and too many of us have exited the field. And so we will get to that today. But first, I want to talk, have a discussion with one of our esteemed guests, Michael Steele. You know, he's best known today for his political commentary on MSNBC. He's the former RNC chairman and the first minority to ever serve in that role. He's the former lieutenant governor of Maryland, which is where I live, and where he chairs the Minority Business Enterprise Task Force. So please join me in welcoming Michael Steele. What have you seen, even at MSNBC, and how they diversify? You know, what are there any programs or things that you've seen that are working?
It's a challenge for large institutions, generally speaking. It doesn't matter what walk of professionalism they're in, media, politics, business. It doesn't matter, because they're now having to confront real time every day the churning inside of their organizations by their members or their employees or their board to do better and be better at expanding the ranks of opportunity for Black and brown men and women in that particular sector. Media, which is often sort of the watchdog of these things, has been caught flat-footed countless times of preaching and castigating and judging others, while at the same time ignoring their own racist tendencies, their misogynistic tendencies, etc. So this is a whole new space for a lot of businesses, and particularly in the media space, where they are so front-faced, so forward-faced in this area, where they're projecting image, right? They're reflecting imagery of the communities that they're covering, and to the extent that when people see them on air, in the news, in entertainment, and they don't see themselves reflected in that, that's where this awakening really comes home. So, whether it's a DEI program, diversity, equity, and inclusion program, or some form of that, they're making these steps and taking these steps to be more forward-facing in projecting to the community individuals who look like them, have their lived experience, and it can speak in the moment to what's really going on in a way of authenticity. Just this week, in the unfolding story around police brutality, watching Black correspondents emotionally deal with that on air is I think a real reflection of the angst and the pain that's going on in the community. So you see that authentic moment. And I think the more we're able to reflect that authenticity in our media, the more we engage people to really consider the impact these stories are having on their lives. It's not just others. It's not just them. It's not just that neighborhood, but it's something that I realized could happen to me. And if it doesn't happen to me, I still should be concerned about it.
And truly, you could see the emotion as that was covered. So we have students who are looking to go into the field. We don't want them to be discouraged.
Right.
We want them to be encouraged, like they should belong there. You belong there, to tell the stories of the community. What advice would you give them?
Well, that's the first, you just gave the most important piece of that advice, which is you belong there. This is your story as much as anybody else's. You have as much say in how it's covered, and how the editorial narrative is determined. No longer can we just sit idly by and allow newspapers, social media, cable, network television, editorialize or create opinion around our story. CRT is a very good example of that. As I said recently to Nicole Hannah-Jones on my podcast, I asked her the question, I said, why is it now that when Black people start telling their story, white folks get so upset? And the answer to that question is the history is painful because it's honest and because it's real. And if you're not as a new storyteller, as a journalist, as an editor, as a writer, as an anchor, as a talking head, as we're called in the business for those who commentate and give analysis, if you're not at that table to be able to communicate those stories, then how will we know? How will we know what happened in 1619 and why that's so integral to the 1776 story? Yeah. How will we know that the 1776 story happened because of 1619 and the continuing narrative? So the most important piece of information is knowing that you are the storyteller as much as you are the story. And you have the opportunity to be clarifying in the history of the narrative, not just for Black and brown people, but for the country as a whole. Right. So walk into that room, stake your claim, and be prepared, always be prepared, and smart about what you're doing, but know that you have a chance to not only tell the story, be the story, write the history, as much as you convey the history.
We also have public relations folks that are on the phone,
right,
as well. And so these relationships that we need to build with journalists, can you speak to that at all about, what is, how to do that, how to really build the relationships?
It is hard if you don't know reporters and if you don't know journalists, for them to trust that what you're giving to them or what you're sharing with them is good stuff. They're going to second, third source that to make sure. But if you've got a relationship with them where they know you're reliable, that your information is good, that, they get the PR spin side of things, and they know that's part of the business that you're in from a PR standpoint, but they also know that you're just not blowing smoke, then you've created a lane in which your information is going to be taken as reliable and serious more often than not. And people will actually come to you to verify the information they're getting because they know you're a reliable source.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We truly appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. Looking forward to next conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All righty.
All right. Bring up Carmela Glover, who you just recently met, and Emily Graham, and they will review the research with us. And so we can get started with that.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah. Thanks everyone for your patience as well. We are going to talk, Emily and I. Emily, thank you for joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about the research that our organizations are doing around race and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of the research we're doing, some of the findings I'll share about DAA and other relevant research that will hopefully be helpful to helping us move along. But we measure, we can then manage. So thank you for joining us, Emily.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
All right. So Emily is a chair of the board for the Institute for Public Relations Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And Emily, could you talk a little bit about the current research work that you're doing and the insights that will come out of it, the impact it will have?
I'm really excited about this research that my co-chair, Dr. Natalie Tyndall, who is at the University of Texas, and I are working on with the Institute of Public Relations and Anitra Henry and that whole team over there. As a person who wears two hats in diversity, equity, inclusion strategy, that being running the global DE&I strategy at Omnicom Group, and then also leading our global DE&I communication strategy, I see how essential it is for communications as a function and diversity and inclusion as a function to be connected. And what our research is going to interrogate is, what is the communicator's role in ensuring that diversity, equity, inclusion comes to life, and where are their disconnects? In most organizations, there is a silo. You have the diversity, equity, inclusion team sitting here, and then you have communications functions and marketing functions and sales functions and all the other stakeholders. And what companies have become accustomed to is coming to the diversity, equity, inclusion team in crisis when there are issues and saying, help me figure out how to communicate about it. That does not work. It is essential that every organization have a healthy relationship integrating and working with the diversity, equity, inclusion strategists at their companies in partnership. I think that communicators, and we at IPR believe that communicators are catalyst for a robust and healthy and important diversity and inclusion strategy, that you can't do it without them. And every communicator needs to understand what inclusive communications looks like and how that impacts a company's reputation, how it impacts their audience engagement. And it's not just when there are tragedies that are happening in the market. It's not just Tyree Nichols, and that's when you call on the diversity and inclusion team and say, can you tell me what to say? There have to be fundamental purposes, principles, and values around diversity and inclusion. So our research is going to evaluate chief communications officers, chief diversity officers, their functions and their roles, and where they intersect in helping advance a company's diversity, equity, inclusion ambitions and strategies. And what has not worked. We believe that since 2020, we must mature in the diversity and inclusion model. We are not responding and chasing. We are envisioning, and we are championing, and we are expectant of organizations to be more mature in how they communicate, when, who does it, and what they mean, and how we hold them accountable for what they've said. So we're going to be doing qualitative and quantitative research. We are going to begin our focus groups and our interviews in the spring. And we look forward. We don't think there's ever been any research in industry done like this before that challenges communicators to rethink their roles in helping to be advocates and partners in true diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by the way, it's not just our Black communicators. This is a proficiency that every communicator at every company needs to have. This is the evolution of our industry, knowing what and when and how to foster inclusive communications. And so we really look forward to it. And we'll have more maybe for next year's program. We'll have the results to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. So you said you're starting in the spring. You'll be doing qualitative and quantitative research with, will that be executives, right, of chief diversity?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at chief communications officers, and we're going to be looking at chief diversity officers, and everybody in this company knows, or among family, those are two very different demographics of individuals usually, right? So we're not just talking about the two roles, we're talking about the makeup of roles. Most people that you find in chief diversity officer roles are underrepresented communities, very heavily Black, but other communities as well represented, women. And then you have the chief communication officer role, which we know there are not very many people of color represented there. So we're going to be getting into a lot of intersectional identities and understandings of the underlying issues of what makes diversity, equity, inclusion, and communications a challenge. Let's be real. Let's talk about that. Let's really get into some of the issues and some of the history behind what's happened with both the chief comms role and the CDIO role. The other thing I think that's important, we know that before 2020, most organizations did not have a chief diversity officer reporting to the CEO. Now that you have another C-level member of your organization who is also accountable for strategy and operation, and that is a peer to the chief communication officer and the chief people officer and all of that, it's changed the dynamics. It's changed the level of influence and respect. And that doesn't always go well at companies. And there are some communicators who are gatekeepers. There are some communicators who have not been as collaborative as they could be to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the forefront of agendas and not buried or not shot down or not just a tactic when we need to communicate about a tragedy. So we're going to get into all of it. I am really excited about the depth of it. We will be kind of commissioning several pieces of content around it that we hope us as communicators can not only understand what's happening, but use some tools and use some tactics to make our strategy stronger. So.
Got it. Thank you, Emily. I and as well as many of those in the chat are excited about.
Oh, good.
I do think it's a never researched area, and if it is, it's very under researched. I think it's very unique that we're looking into the dynamic between the Chief Communications Officer and the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. So I think that is exciting. And as you mentioned, there's a stark difference in those two populations, and that's the demographic, right? And the Diversity Action Alliance data that we took from 2020 and 2021 as evidence of that, where we saw that our industry is nearly 80% white, and at the senior most levels, about 95 to 98% white, depending on the sector, whether it's agency or corporate. So we've been collecting this data for 3 years, and I think the last report out was that we're still not where we need to be. It was our benchmark report, and pretty soon this spring we're also going to be publishing our progress report. So we've collected data for the last 3 years. And what we found, just to not give away the full report, but just some teasers and maybe some things that will not be surprising amid COVID, amid DE&I fatigue, which I think we've heard far too often this week, even in some of the media coverage. But the advancement is not much, right? In the last 3 years, of those who participated, at least in the Diversity Action Alliance's annual reporting, we've got 300 organizations who are part of our membership. We've only seen a very small increase, less than 10% in our diversity. So in particular to Black leadership and Black PR professionals, there was an increase of 1%. And this is representative, so representation. So from a sheer number standpoint, we've only had a 1% increase in Black professionals who are represented in PR since 2020. And there's a lot of factors that are layered there that could contribute to it. Anitra Henry, who is very close to both the IPR research as well as Diversity Action Alliance research, penned an article this week on Monday in PR Daily. So for those of you who haven't read it, please go do. It talked about DE&I fatigue. She doesn't refer to the data. It's very evident that this has, for some reason, been deprioritized. Numbers may have been affected by COVID-19, by economic outlooks and horizons, but nonetheless, it is not where we want to be.
It's unacceptable. It is unacceptable to have a 1% increase in, I mean, that's give or take, right? That's plus or minus. That's not good. So why is that? I'm really eager to understand that more in the research, really eager.
Agreed. And, you know, I 1%, as you said, could be a rounding error.
I was going to say, that's a rounding error, yeah.
Yes. And so we will, you know, we're going to hear the reactions of those in the panel to follow, but there's a lot there. It was 1% for Black professionals overall. And of course, that doesn't even talk about the small increase that also affects other marginalized races, right? So Hispanic and Asian and Native American, right? And so that will all come out in the full report. We're focused today on how the Black PR professionals are showing up. But our goal is for our industry to mirror our communities. And if we're counting, and our data comes from the US, by 2025, we need to be at least 40% people of color represented in this industry. We're less than 30 still. And so we have a long way to go. 2 years by 2025 is when, our mission as an organization is for our profession to mirror that. And we're just not there yet. So we need to start to look additionally into not just the representation, but what tactics do we need to implement for retention of those professionals of color and promotion of those professionals of color. And so the DAA will also be commissioning a survey soon of our workforce of people of color. So not the executives, but kind of from the bottom up. What makes you feel included? What makes you feel like there are equitable policies? Do you currently feel a change from 2020? I know that there is a spirit or a feeling of, hey, it hasn't changed. If it hasn't changed in the numbers, it hasn't changed in the inclusive and belonging. But I'm optimistic because of many of the stories we've heard of organizations who really want to turn it around.
I'm optimistic too, and I would just say thank you for that work. I see a lot of people in the chat who need to be seen and heard. With clarity, it cannot be ignored. It's going to be in plain view. And so you're going to have a prescription for people who don't understand why they can't retain the talent. The talent's going to tell them. And then the responsibility is on the organizations to make those changes, right? We have been heard, so what are we going to do about it? The fatigue part, I'll just mention really quick because I'm super interested what the panelists say. It's insidious. This whole, I'm tired of DE&I, let me go back to the way the things were. We feel threatened, we feel under attack. That is really, really undercurring a lot of things happening in this return to office conversation, in this critical race theory conversation, and a lot of it. And our community has to really be wide open and clear about what is going on in front of us. And I hope our research can begin to combat some of this, because fatigue is not an option. Put your boots on and we're climbing. Let's go.
No,
Let's go.
Fatigue is absolutely not an option. And just to close this out and hear the responses and reactions of our panel, Dr. Chuck Wallington recently did, he's the Chief Communications Officer at Cone Health, and he recently did a full study on the experience of being a Black male executive. And he is a Black male executive as Chief Communications Officer, but he opined and got the experiences of 30 different Black male executives who had an average of 14 years of experience. And that retention piece is going to be really big, understanding where those gaps are from policy standpoint, from a culture standpoint, from an inclusivity standpoint, is the themes that came out of his research and we know that Black male executives are far and few. So for him to get 30 of them to contribute to his research was amazing. But the themes that came out of that were, we are still in need of support from our allies, right? Relationships in that case are impactful. We're pursuing our own goals while trying to be servant leaders and bringing up those who are coming behind us and look like us. That there is an impact on US corporations. Whether it has been enough to influence them to prioritize it, we don't know, but we know that the full perspective of all marginalized people, especially African Americans, is important to an organization's bottom line. And frankly, there's just a challenge of being an African American, period, in the workforce. And so for those of you who are interested in reading his full report, Dr. Chuck Wallington's paper is called Navigating the C-Suite, Exploring the Leadership Journey of African American Male Executives in US Corporations. I'll drop that title in the chat. But I'd be interested to hear what the panel has to say. Thank you so much for sharing and for joining this panel with me, Emily.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to bring to the stage those who are in the next panel. Deborah, if you want to introduce them.
Absolutely. And thank you both for all of those remarks. It's heartwarming to me to see that we are in good hands with you two doing this research and really taking the helm here. So we have coming to join us for comments. We have Raul Davis from Ascendant Marketing Group, he's CEO there. Nikki Forum from Amazon, Marvin Hill from the Humana Foundation, Kenitra Joseph from the CDC Foundation, and Tanisha Reed from Amazon. Thank you for joining me here today. So you heard the research, you heard the data, you are living it yourselves. Let's talk about it. There's a lot of discussion happening in the chat, which I can appreciate. And some strong comments being said there, which you can all see. What's your reaction? Who wants to go first? Raul, tell us what your reaction is to that.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised, as you said, we see it. And I think it's the reality. We have to kind of create a narrative around we're in PR, right? So we need to think out a narrative and a way to respond. I mean, one of the things I think of is I'd love to kind of help see the pipeline increase from the university angle in terms of the Gen Zs. I know, like, I'm not sure if the interest in PR is the same, but I think we probably need to do more work there in terms of cultivating that so that there's more of a pipeline. And I think that more of us are beginning to be in positions where we can, help make the move ourselves and begin to hire more. So that's what's within the sphere of influence. And I'd love to hear the other ideas and chip in on any of them I can.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Nikki, do you have any comments you want to share here?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, you're doing an amazing job, Deborah. Thank you for facilitating this conversation. Yeah, I think there's some interesting things that we can say about this next generation, the generation of new PR professionals. We live in this day and age where many of us, as we were coming up through the ranks, social media wasn't a thing. You couldn't be your own journalist. There were ways in which you had to go about getting your story told. And now any person with a camera is essentially a journalist. We've seen the impacts that has had on newsrooms and how the impact, especially on newspapers. And so I think there's maybe some type of shift that we have to make as professionals in this field to make it more appetizing, to showcase the ways in which you can be a part of this professional group of people, while also maintaining the culture of your generation. And I think some of the traditions I am very beholden to, but I also think there's a point in period in time where we have to start to shift the way that we're doing things to accommodate the next generation.
Absolutely. I hear you on that. Thank you for that. And Marvin, what would you like to contribute here?
Yeah, great comments, and thank you, Deborah. I guess first of all, I'm frustrated when you think about when I hear the data, and I'm sorry, Carmela and Emily, I'm fatigued, right? I'm still here though. I'm still here, still standing. I'm still with you, but fatigued. I've worked 25 plus years over several industries, the newspaper industry. I've worked in the talent acquisition space with diversity recruiting, retention, and all that good stuff, as well as corporate communications. And over that time frame, it just feels like I'm on this, never-ending odyssey, right? There just hasn't been any broad, sweeping advancements, changes in this work, right? So, for me, I'm a journalist at heart, so it makes me ask questions. So, first of all, to myself, am I doing enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I mentoring the next generation, right? Am I working with the folks who are gathered here today, to move the needle? Secondly, the innovation piece is what I keep coming back to. The tech space is driven by innovation, right? Where's the innovation in our space? Where are those innovative ideas that will give us that leap, that jump, to where we're trying to be to reach our goals, right? And, have we built, the adequate, the accurate business case, right, for advancing DEI in PR for Blacks and for diverse people? So a bit frustrated, trying to not be as fatigued, right? But still asking questions and ready to work with others to improve things.
All right, I hear you on the fatigue, because we've been at it for so long, right? And the conversations, the talk, and just talking, and it's like we're talking to each other. And so we are doing what we can at the level that we are, but we know that we need help to expand this. And Raul, your conversations about the pipeline, I 100% agree, because as I mentor students who come to me, mostly they come to me after they've graduated and yet they've not done any internships. And I kind of blame the schools for that. So I And they can do but so much. I remember my hunger and eagerness and doing things for myself, but everybody's not like that, right? And I think about the fact that they made the decision to go to college, right? They paid their good money and they completed what was required of them, but nobody said you have to have an internship in order to compete, right? You got to compete with everybody else that's had 2 or 3 internships and big names on their resumes. So I thank Martinique. I see your comment about your partnership with Hampton University, my alma mater, and at Nike, and it just brings a smile to my face. But the universities have to insist that these students have internships. In my opinion, that those were my first 2 jobs came from my first 2 internships. So.
I think Nikki said something that has to be acknowledged as well about how the dynamic has changed. And I think these days, if you have a PR agency, you got to do more than PR, right? I mean, so we focus on CEO branding and integrate a few services, but I think any PR firm has to have a social media shop within it because the lines have blurred so much. And that is, to Marvin's point, part of the innovation is like being able to do more and offer more. And then the second thing is, what do we have to do in terms of agencies to have more opportunities with some of the Fortune 500 companies, right, in terms of supplier division? Because that also would create the opportunity to scale, increase the size of our firms, and then we would be able to increase our hiring capacity as well. So those are some additional thoughts I have.
I agree with that. Thank you.
I'll chime in, Deborah. I think in some ways, DEI in the communications world and the public relations world is still the new bright, shiny object, right? Like it is this new asset in the communicator's toolbox that you can use for brand purpose, cause-related marketing, so many other things in the suite, and not necessarily always authentically. I was really, if you had asked me over a year ago, I would have been surprised by these findings, candidly, just because of all the conversation about DE&I. Surely that is translating into tangible, actionable programs and initiatives that are going to drive results. But in the last year, I've had a couple of experiences. One, in hiring agencies, where I'm seeing the bait and switch of Black talent and the new business pitch not on the work in certain instances, or the hemorrhaging of Black talent with dizzying rates of turnover within places and spaces where the culture is not nurturing what's needed to keep them, for them to thrive, and for their contributions to be valued. The other, I'll just say, I recently attended a national awards program for awards focused on, let's just say, cause-related marketing, where easily 75% of the campaigns were centered on some type of DE&I initiative or connected to. Yet I counted 1 Black professional on stage accepting the awards. And so in some ways, it's the thing that, that we can use to position purpose, to position value, et cetera. But we had companies in an optics business, not even considering the optics, the talent, driving the work, not being represented, et cetera. And whether you call what's going on the Great Resignation or the Big Quit, where folks are just realizing that they're leaning in a little bit more to their power with the culture that they're in, what their demands are, whether it's work-life balance. I think we're seeing more Black professionals, and in particular in the public relations industry, kind of challenging that and being caught up in some of what we're seeing holistically in the talent space.
I hear you. Yes, great comments there. Tanisha, you pushed through. You made it to Amazon. You have a PR job. How do you react to this data? What are you feeling, sensing? What's been your experience here?
So I think the data is very interesting, and I will start by saying that I am a part of Gen Z. So I am a recent grad who had 7 internships when I was in college, and one of those was with Amazon. And
you said 7?
7, yes.
I said that on purpose, like I didn't hear you. 7 internships? And your first job was one of those internships, correct? That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, go
So
ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine. So my current job now is with Amazon, and I did have an internship with Amazon in 2021. And I will say that that internship was something that really shaped what I wanted to do when it came to PR. I think a lot of people know about the communications industry, especially the younger generation, but not everybody knows what you can do in the communications industry. Like, a lot of people hear PR and they're like, oh, so you're going to be someone's publicist, like that's a celebrity or something? It's like, no, that's not all you can do in PR. Like, there's so much more to it. And I think that that's something that really needs to be done as awareness when it comes to Gen Z, and really realizing what there is to do. Like, there's now people who have jobs that are just specifically on influencer marketing. So the industry is changing so much faster than I feel like a lot of companies are catching up to. So bringing that awareness in and making those partnerships with these HBCUs is really going to get a lot of our Black young talent into the communications industry, and to get them excited for it, and having internships where they're not just getting the low-level tasks and things like that, but an internship where you're teaching, you're coaching, you're guiding these interns, where you can give them a foundation and the support that they'll need to enter the communications industry and be excited for it. And I luckily am able to say that I had a lot of mentors and a lot of support when it came to me entering the industry. So I felt prepared for it, and I was excited for it and knew exactly what I wanted to do, but not everyone can say that. So that's my just initial take on that, and that I just think more awareness needs to be done for our young Black talent.
Thank you for that. That's great insight. And I, as I hear you speaking, I can see where you and folks like you will be able to help us to bridge some of that gap, to understand, what do we need to do today? Some of what some of others of us on the phone, we may have approached it a different way. We may have had our own hunger. And what I do sense is, though, is that you were driven and had your own hunger for this. And so and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you seek out your mentors, or did they find you? Did they see that you had the talent? Just curious here.
It was a little bit of both, I would say. Not all of my mentors came from the same place. Like, some have come from my internships. I was a ColorComm Next Gen Fellow, so that was another opportunity where I was able to meet so many other people in the industry and get exposure to the jobs that are out there as well, and to also connect with other students and recent grads who want to go into the communications industry. And I also think that kind of my personal drive had a big play into my career journey so far. And I really do use my passion for communications to motivate other people that are my age to really get into the communications field and understand that there's so much that you can do, and the representation that we need in these communication spaces is so important, because there's so many times when we've seen something and we're like, well, there definitely wasn't a diverse voice in the room for that to happen. And we need people to understand that and to infiltrate these spaces and to make our presence known. And that's going to be super important for Black professionals in the communications industry, and really upping that 1% to hopefully be 5% and 10% and so on, as we're trying to navigate this new communications world that we're in, but to also motivate others to join us in this effort.
Absolutely. And I can see that we just have to wrap our arms around you to make sure that you also stay in the field, because you definitely have something to contribute here. As do all of these other students that are entering some kind of way. It's not some kind of way. There are tried and true ways to ensure folks feel like they belong in the field, and then can be nurtured to advance in the field. And those are things that we can do as professionals.
Deborah, can I jump in? Tanasia can't leave Amazon now. Look.
Yeah.
Already,
Well,
she's got a
you
job.
put her on
now.
the big screen,
Look.
so she's exposed. She's exposed with great talent. So that's there's a war on talent. But But no, I can appreciate that. I mean, the nurturing will need to continue, and she can grow and blossom at Amazon. And then it will make sense for her to look at other opportunities outside of the company, outside the company to continue her growth, right? So that's awesome. And thank you for speaking up on that. What other comments do you guys and reactions do you have? Because, the 1%, it's really, I was hoping it would be more, but, I can see with my own eyes and know that it's not, right? We know what meetings we're in every day. We see the hiring that's happening around us. We have friends in the field, and we see movement. We definitely see movement and moving around, but we also see folks opting out of the corporate and agency jobs and starting their own businesses. But for me, from my point of view, being part of corporate, I feel like even with the agency, you're still dealing with the same people who are going to make decisions about bringing you in or not. And so it's just a choice. And so you still need to kind of change mindsets here.
And I'll just add, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, and I saw some comments in the chat around Black males, right? In PR, in communications, in corporate America. I think it's a huge problem, right? And I don't know if we are talking about it enough. We've all had our journey. We've all, not all of us, but, some of us have been the only, right? That feeling's not great. I look across my organization, I'm one of a few, and it's never fun. And, I've lived it my entire career. So, as I look to the pipeline, right, the next Marvin, right, the next Raul, right, the next, all of the great gentlemen who are on the call with us, where do we find them, right? So, when I talk about that innovation and the programming and the initiatives, the partnerships with universities and agencies and corporations, I mean, we've got to do something to address the problem of finding Black men, right? Nurturing Black men who are having a pretty hard time in this nation at this time.
I hear you. Yeah. And for me, having a son, I've always felt that there was an attack on Black men. And so I tend to gravitate to nurture and mentor young Black men. And anyway, I've had some success with that, some big success that I'm very proud of. Anything else, you guys, anything that you want to react to or put in the space?
I'll put something else out there, Deborah, and it's one of the things that the bright spot I'll say that I find is how awesome is it that we find ourselves in a place where we have and are using the vocabulary to talk about this issue, these issues, have and are using the data to talk about, these issues. And any of us who've been working for a minute can recall what it's been like to not have that vocabulary, right? Or to not have some general awareness among our non-Black peers or peers who aren't people of color about what those terms are, what, are microaggressions, et cetera. What value does diversity of all kinds, whether you're a man in the public relations field, right? Period, or a person of color, a Black person in the public relations field, what value does that have for innovation, creativity, results, revenue, right? Like we now have the vocabulary and we have the data, and we've had it, right, for a bit. And yes, we heard talk about DEI fatigue before this, and that's real as well. But I do find it promising that we're able to have the conversation, right? That we have the terminology, that we have the vocabulary, that we have the data, and that data is connected to what's driving and fueling careers in general, which are the results and the outcomes. And so that's great for future professionals entering the field as well.
Absolutely. That's powerful. Did anybody else want to comment on that?
I can build on that. I really love what you just said, Kenitra. I think it's interesting, and it kind of takes me back to a quote I heard earlier today, and it's something to the, I'm going to paraphrase. It said, I do this because I can't imagine a world where we all get tired and give up. And it's so timely in the sense of this conversation, because even though it gets hard sometimes, we have to find those bright spots. We have to find those moments of accomplishment that we can be proud of, and that can continue to give us one more day, one more opportunity, one more meeting, one more Zoom call, one more something that's going to push us through. And more specifically, as a woman of color and as a Black woman in corporate America, there's so few of us. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I think when you talk about a Black woman who also works in the DEI space, who also works in PR, you're talking about a very, very small percentage of people. And so I think we have an opportunity, those of us who work in corporate America, to use the strength of our brands to bring these conversations to broader audiences. And so while it may be hard and it may be difficult at times, I encourage all of us to find whatever it is, that thing inside of us, the why, our why, to keep us grounded, keep us going, and make sure that we continue to keep pushing forward, because the opportunities, I do think, are endless. I think the possibilities are before us, and we have so much work to do, but I'm very proud of the work that has been done by so many people.
Right. Amen to that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo that, and it's National Optimism Day, so I'll be optimistic
Is
and
that
say,
right?
look, a lot of progress over decades, right? And we keep chipping at it. Yeah, 1% isn't a lot, but let's keep chipping at it, and eventually things will flow our way. So let's keep working at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Go
gonna say,
ahead.
I love that. And just to keep with the optimism, I just offer that the optics of this event, right, are so valuable for so many people. I mean, it's so important for the folks who are in the pipeline, who need a good word to survive another day, right? They need to see us, they need to hear us, and connect with us. And I would love to see a panel like this happen quarterly, right? Or just more time, on more occasions than Black History Month. And sorry, Shelley, I know it's a lot of work.
No, I agree with that. And I think it's so powerful, right? To be able to have these kinds of conversations in front of so many people. You were talking about the microaggressions, and I had done an interview yesterday, and one of the questions was about, when you mentor, do you need to mentor Black people differently, or people of color? I can't remember exactly what the question was. It was something like that. And I had to think back, and I wanted to say something about, like a mainstream answer. Then I said, no, yes, you do, actually. You do. And because the person in front of you has gone through a lot of microaggressions, right? And things that they couldn't put their finger on. And so when they're trying to express something, perhaps you can relate already, if you're a person of color or Black. And so when they're speaking, you might be able to finish their sentence, about it, or at least help them to understand what is happening and then how they can work through it. And so I've been thinking about my response to that, and I was like, yeah, like it's not the same. It's no different than you cannot treat all of your employees the same way, because they all are different, and all are bringing different experiences. And so, yes, you have to mentor differently. Your listening has to be on point. You do not have to be Black to mentor a Black person, but your listening needs to be on point, so that you can actually hear what they're saying is happening, even if all the words are not there for them. So that just happened yesterday, so I wanted to share that. Okay, so anyone want to offer some closing remarks here? for this panel. You guys have been awesome. I really could talk to you all night. And to your point, I think, yes, we should have some ongoing conversations, not about just talking about the problem, but like I said, getting to solutions, because we've been talking for a long time, especially some of us who've been in the field for a while.
I don't mind getting us started, Deborah. And again, thank you so much for facilitating this discussion. I think about something I used to hear is when I was younger, you can tell the future of a church by the number of young people. And so I just want to drive home that we need to make sure that we are nurturing our young people, that we are investing in them, not just monetarily, but in time and expertise. We need to push back when they are a little different. You know, Gen Z, they rock, they hit a little different sometimes. But sometimes they need they need us to push them in ways that maybe they don't even realize. And we need to be open as professionals to receive some of their up-level coaching as well. And so I just want to close out by saying the future is bright for PR, and particularly for Black publicists. And I think that we are going to see some amazing things come out of this next generation.
Awesome. That's awesome. Raul, parting words.
Yeah, just want to echo the sentiments that I think that if we need to get together more and workshop this a bit more, and then I think that we'll put solutions, because you feel like you're on an island sometime, like to Marvin's point. Yeah. So it's nice to even be in this sort of setting and have these sort of conversations, and I hope that we're able to do it more.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Marvin.
I just offer, to the students who are out there and professionals alike, right, who are frustrated, who are fatigued, just to say, hang in there, right? I mean, I know the journey's hard, but you're smarter than you think you are. You're more resilient than you think you are. Just keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenitra.
Can I just say ditto?
I love it.
Ditto. I will add that part of what's inspiring about this conversation, and that candidly, I don't get enough of in my day-to-day and need to be more intentional about, is the value of mentoring. And we all know it. We know it to be true. And I can't count the number of times throughout my career, or that I reflect back on what I didn't know. And I know there were professionals who did. And it's the nuances, right? It's not always, it's like you said, Deborah, it's not just the textbook stuff, but it's the nuance of what it means to be a Black professional that may not be written in black and white in a book somewhere, et cetera. But folks have lived it, they know it. And boy, could I appreciate it, someone pulling me aside, just kind of whispering in my ear. And so I think the spaces that would allow that with vulnerability and authenticity would be nice. And so not sure what that means or how or where that's going to go. But when I've had it, I've appreciated it. And I think it's critically important.
Absolutely.
In this space.
I love you for saying that. Thank you. That touched me because it's so on point. And Tanisha, let's bring up the rear here, represent the future for us. What are your parting words here?
So I first would like to say that I appreciate you all so much, and I'm so thankful to be a part of this conversation as the only Gen Zer here. And I also am very appreciative that I'm able to be on this panel, as well as Nikki, who has been my mentor since I've been back at Amazon full time, and now amazing manager. So I just had to throw that out and say my thanks to her, of course publicly, but she knows that I love her behind the scenes and stuff. And just really excited to see the future of PR, to be a part of that journey as well. And I definitely, encourage all of us to use the positions that we're in to, of course, uplift more people and more young Black talent to come into the communications industry. And I really think that 1% can be so much higher once we all come together and really nurture the young generation who's coming in and really show them what communications is all about, and that there's so much more to it than what a lot of people think.
Awesome. And thanks for being so willing and open to listening. I want to introduce our next panel that are going to speak to solutions. We heard some here And we're going to hear some more and really just dig in. And so the panelists that are going to join me now are Kim Adams, who's from Ulta Beauty. We have Denville Hay Jr., who's from the McKinsey Institute for Black Economic Mobility. We have Haley Jones from Amazon. We have Tanisha Jackson Warner from Megami Group. And we have Eric Winkfield from Mbooth and Mbooth Health. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today, or this evening. I don't know if we have international folks or not, but thank you. So you heard the discussion, a really, really powerful discussion. And as I said, there's this, there's DEI fatigue. And it's an age-old problem. And we know it's not just public relations field, but that's what's near and dear to us. And it's our profession. So that's why we want to zero in on solutions and tried and true things that could work, or just ideas that we can put in the space. So I want to call on Kim to kick us off, to let us know what you heard and what you're thinking in terms of direction we should go.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And what I heard, to your point, I don't think is anything new that a lot of us haven't heard before. This is very difficult work. The fact that we are dealing with issues that are not unique to PR or to corporate, but to America more broadly, and in some instances, even globally, it's not easy to solve, but there are solutions. And so first of all, I want to stop and say Happy Black History Month to everyone. And thank you so much to the Museum of PR for carving out space intentionally to have this discussion. And so for us at Ulta Beauty, DE&I is a part of our DNA. It's baked into everything that we do. Hopefully, those of you who are guests and consumers, you feel that when you walk into our stores. But as the US's largest beauty retailer, we understand it's our responsibility and a privilege to elevate and celebrate and support underrepresented and historically excluded voices through our work and through those guest experiences. And so I'm relatively new in this role as VP of DE&I on talent acquisition, but I'm so impressed with what I'm seeing already. And I tell people this all the time, it's the first time in my career as a DE&I executive where I'm not convincing our leaders of the business case for DE&I. It's baked into what we do. And so the biggest opportunity for us is really understanding how we have impact through operationalizing it in our day-to-day through our processes and policies and benefit strategies. And so I really look forward to, leading the work of pushing this incredibly important work forward for not only the beauty industry, but the retail industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Denville, how do you want to follow that up?
Yeah, happy to. And thank you to the museum for putting on this great event, and excited to be here with you all. I think my reaction is, similar to Kim's in that, and everyone else's, is like not really surprised. I think, it is frustrating, but, us at McKinsey, we've done research on this, and we looked at sort of Black representation across the private sector more broadly. And what we found was it was actually going to take about a century to close some of these parity gaps that we see. So if you just think about that sort of big picture number and then relate it to the comms industry, while it's quite frustrating to see the slow rate of progress, I'm really not surprised. And I think to some degree, it's going to take really bold ideas and thinking in order for us to really move the needle in a way that I think we all want to see. And to echo Kim too, I think one of the things that we've tried to do is make it very clear on the business case for diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And I think that as we think about some of the things we heard around fatigue and entering different economic cycles and how folks might start to think differently about these types of initiatives, I think it's even more important that communicators, folks in the D&I role are, really articulately tying D&I initiatives to like the business objectives and making it very clear that, having diverse our diverse hiring efforts are helping us fill, previously hard to fill technical roles, or having diverse perspectives, folks who are bilingual, whatever it might be, are allowing us to better serve consumers in this particular geography, right? And I think it goes back to a little bit of what Emily was saying before, is like, oftentimes D&I is in a silo. And I think the more that procurement is trying to, advance their goals, and they bring in D&I, and marketing is trying to advance their goals and they bring in D&I, and HR, and they all do the same thing. D&I sort of starts to sit at the center of this ecosystem for the business, and then starts to become part of all of the operations and really the commercial strategy of the business. So I think the more that we can really think about that, and articulate that well, can sort of help us. I don't know that if that's, revolutionary different than what we've been attempting to do, but I think it is super important, and what folks are resonating with, from what we see.
I can see the thumbs up coming in on that. I see in the chat, and Mike Paul says every PR firm, and I might add corporation, in the top, is that 50-50 should commit to hiring at least 2 vice presidents or above of color in 2023. I second that. I was like, amen. That would help to fix the problem right there. So I'm in agreement. Haley, what do you have for us? We heard from your Amazon peers, and thank you again for sponsoring the program. What would you say could be solutions for us?
I appreciate that we're taking a solution-oriented focus. As a Black woman in today's climate, it's easy as a personal person to feel such a wide range of emotions about the state of affairs in the world around us, not necessarily even at a US level, but globally. And we bring some of that with us to work as well, right? So how do we maintain the integrity of what we're trying to build for our customers wherever we might be, while also honoring our very lived experiences, our very real lived experiences. And something that I've been really excited about building with Worldwide Communications at Amazon is bringing together our DEI work, finding some actual commonalities across our business teams with our PR practitioners to build solutions that are holistically integrated and also intersectional, that don't exist for one business team, one solution, one locale, but that zoom out, think big, take the perspective of our global customer, and work backwards from that. I'm a huge fan of that process that we take across all of our business problems or business items that we need to solve for and innovate on behalf of customers. So when we think about, well, what does my customer need? Well, have you asked them? Have you listened to the customers that you have internally? And I like that in my organization, we've taken that first step. So one, we've built an DEI arm that's specific for our communications organization, but one that also connects with our global diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts led by Candy Castleberry. So we're taking a focus that is building bespoke solutions for our communicators, but then also looking at what we're doing holistically as a company. And I really appreciate the both and not either or approach.
I hear you. And then you guys have a wide range of employees and types all over the place. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for hiring minority communicators. Tanisha, what do you want to say?
Well, one, thank you all for having me. Such an inspiring conversation. And when I look across the panelists, I feel like there are definitely different points of views, from client side to major corporations to agencies as well as organizations. And so from my standpoint, I'm going to use advice just based on being an agency owner, and give you all maybe food for thought that you can apply within your individual fields. So something that I believe has worked very well for IGAMI Group, and we are a multicultural communications agency that has worked well in attracting talent of color, is we spotlight a shared purpose between our organization and talent of color. So if you are on the line, really think about, what is your company's purpose? What is that mission? But how does that purpose come to life in the lives of talent of color? How does that purpose actually impact talent of color communities? And if you can find that intersect point, you can create a more meaningful relationship with talent so that your organization can become a place where talent can say, you know what? I have my own desire to do something meaningful. I want to figure out my own personal purpose, and I can actually find the intersect point between my personal purpose and meaning and my professional at this organization. So if you can make those correlations, that has been a winning formula for us. We're always talking to our talent about what's your profession, purpose meet profession, and how do we support you in activating that? So our North Star is making the world a better place for people of color. And all of the work that we're doing is laddering back to that, whether it's a financial sector company and fighting financial inequities, or a beauty company and making sure that the beauty industry has campaigns that celebrate all beauty. And so by doing that, you will actually wake up one day and realize you have the ability to create the culture you desire. And so when we look out across our culture, our leadership team is 100% diverse, made up of people of color, of different racial, ethnic backgrounds. The entire organization is 76% people of color and 73% women. Now, I know that's not the case for all of us. We all have our different parts, but what I want to leave here is we have the ability to create the cultures we imagine and desire for young talent of color. So I'll be quiet because I got a lot of lessons, but let me hush so that Eric can go.
I love all of that, of what you said, and that ability. I think it's aspirational, but to your point, it's doable. So thank you for that. Eric, talk to us.
Hello. Thank you so much, Deborah. It's good to see you and be a part of this event. Thank you so much to the PR Museum for having us and making space for this conversation. What comes to mind are a few things, right? But first and foremost is that for not only people of the African American community and our allies who are on this call tonight as well, is to remember that this is a journey, right? And a part of this journey, I want us to also keep in mind that there are certain things that we have to continue to go through. And for our allies on the call, everything is not an immediate or quick fix, right? Certain things require us to really take time, think through it, and evolve and move things in a direction. But let us not get stagnated or stuck in trying to overthink for the perfect solution and really move forward with making progress and doing it together. Something else that comes to mind about this particular topic is that we have to begin to also pull our resources together. I feel like there are so many different groups in our industry and we're all solving for a big goal, but we all have different roles that we can play to solve and chop off different pieces of that big goal that we can own and we can work together to really move that forward. And so my question becomes, what's your organization? What is your mission if you are a trade association? How does your mission support what somebody else is doing over here, right? And how can we come together to really advance it? One group can say, we want to focus on making sure the students, our next generation of talent coming into coming into this industry, they have the resources, the networks, as well as the opportunities that they need to be able to enter into this industry ready. Because I will say, when we look at the student population and where they are, can we really honestly say that we spent enough time as an industry really spending time with those students at the university level, right? To make sure that they not only know the opportunities there are in our industry, but how to get in, how to navigate, and how to be successful in industry as well. But it also translates also to the faculty as well, because the faculty members are there spending the most time with our students. Deborah, you know that I'm a proud FAMU alum and I love my HBCU. And one of the things that I know as an HBCU grad was I always yearned to see more industry professionals be in the classroom or spend time with us. And that's what really made the difference between me being a student and me actually realizing and seeing the opportunity that this industry really could be. And then the last point I'll share, and I'll hush so we can talk about something else as well, is that once we have a student, they graduate, they get in the industry, they start with us, making sure, particularly our talent of color, that, you know, whether it's the mentors, whether it's the agency, whether it's the corporation, that we have very clear, direct, and honest career conversations with the talent when they get in the industry. Because so many of us know that, you know, it's one thing to kind of come into the job and be like, well, what do I do next? What does my career grow? How are we really positioning and being thoughtful on the organization end to think about, this is the talent that I have. This is what they're good at, but this is some of the things they could be able to have to be even better. And how do we communicate that directly and authentically and kind of help them build their roadmap to build a sustainable career in our organizations and our profession? But all of it goes back to, how do we all continue to communicate together, pool our resources, and be able to really look and develop that talent that we see coming into the future.
I love that. And anytime somebody says pool our resources to help others, you have me in there all the way. That it's so important. I also hear from you, like from those of us who are managers, you know, about developing your teams across and seeking out. You know, one of the things I do in my organization is I go and find the Black talent in my organization because I know it's important for me to do that, to reach back. And sometimes they'll say, you know, should you be doing this? You know, they feel strange, you know, being singled out. And I just say, absolutely. That's my responsibility. And I own that, you know, and trying to nurture people and also help them to see things for themselves that they haven't seen. They made it to the job, but you know, it may not be where they want to be. And so helping them to grow is important. Any other comments or things that you've heard from people here that you want to comment on?
I would love to stack on Eric's offer about how we developed our next generation and offer and share one solution that our organization has embarked upon that I'm extremely proud of, that Tanasia is a graduate of, which is our Worldwide Communications Internship Program. As I think many of us on this call, 2020 was an actionable year, or a call to action if folks weren't already moving in that direction, which we're grateful for folks joining the journey where they do. And one of the areas in our organization that we wanted to bolster is our early emerging talent. So how do we communicate and gather folks who are early in their career, who are undergraduate or recent graduate, who are interested in a place like Amazon, or who are interested in working at an agency or a smaller nonprofit? And how do we ensure that we do our part as an organization to create a pipeline, whether you return to work at Amazon for another internship or full-time? How do we ensure that during the 12 weeks that you spend with our organization, we do everything that we can to resource you, including time spent with our senior leaders, including time spent across divisions, having access and opportunity to have someone put you on and say, hey, here are the things you need to know. Here are the people you need to meet. Here are the skills that you need to build for your entry-level PR and communications career, no matter where you are, because that's our responsibility as an employer when we have interns, is to ensure that they are equitably resourced from day one, and that doesn't stop when they leave our doors as an intern, that we do continue to reach out and say, how are you doing? How is your career? And if you do come back and work with us, building programs that focus on your entry-level talent. Our learning and development organization is partnering closely with our DEI team to do just that. We identified, hey, we do have an internship, but how do we also, to Eric's point, continue fostering that talent when you are a Tanasia, when you do return to Amazon? Do you have a Nikki? Do you have a Haley? Do you have someone who says, hey, sis,
Right.
I want to make sure that you have these resources. I want to make sure you know about this meeting. I want to make sure that if you have a question that you really don't know or that you really can't self-service, that you have someone that is going to give you the fair, honest, and equitable answer and point you in that right direction. And so I think that's one solution that I feel very passionate and excited about. I'm also a former intern of our organization, and so I feel extremely passionate about making sure that we do prepare our future, which is Tanasia and all other
That's right.
undergraduate and upcoming students or folks who maybe aren't even in PR and communications. How do we open the door? How do we say, okay, maybe you haven't had a traditional background in PR and communications. We still welcome you to apply for our program. You still have an equitable opportunity to come build your skills, to have a person who's going to say, here's how you write a press release. Here's how you do media monitoring. Here's how you do coverage analysis. And I think if we just are really clear with each other among colleagues about saying that somebody gave us an opportunity. Someone said, hey, I believe in you, or hey, come try this internship with me. Hey, come shadow me for a day. Hey, call my colleague and informationally interview them. It can just take one call or one internship or one person who says, I see you and you are welcome here. And I will equitably provide with you what I can. And from there, we have Tanisha 7 internships later.
I
just
think that's
continue brag
powerful.
on her because I just want to
That's right. Keep saying
talk
her
about
name.
that.
You
Talk
know
about
she's
that
gonna get scooped
flywheel.
up, right?
It's a
You know somebody's going to
flywheel.
steal her.
It's a funnel. It's not just our executives that we want to increase that 1%, but we have to start
Right.
with who is in school right now, who is maybe not having the opportunity because they were in a pandemic state for the last 2 years. Our students were not able to be in person or not able to have those in-person internships. How do now we as the on our way professionals come in and say, hey, we do have an internship for you. So I'd love to hear about what our colleagues on the call are also doing in that regard.
And I'll jump in. I'm smiling. I saw someone comment that they're very happy that they're turning 50 in November, just to kind of tie that together. But I think a theme that I'm hearing from everyone on the call is around culture and commitment. And for us, culture and commitment, those two things play an important role in how we're able to retain, develop, as well as continue attracting diverse talent. And I'll share a few examples of some things that work. I don't think, again, any of this is new or game changing. I think it's a matter of will for organizations. It's not a matter of might. We have the resources, we have the talent, we have the intellectual capacity. It's a matter of will and how we apply these things. And so some of the tangibles from a culture perspective for Ulta Beauty is competitive compensation for diverse talent and also competitive benefit packages. So looking across our benefit programs to make sure they're inclusive and reflect that diverse talent that we're trying to attract. Something that's also really important, piggybacking on the pandemic and people working remotely, are hybrid working environments. Some of the standard practices that organizations have applied in the past, they don't apply to diverse talent today. It's not a good fit with people who have very diverse lived experiences. And so flexible schedules can come in different forms and allow people to have greater flexibility in where they work and when they work. And this can help provide freedom to attend religious activities or events. It can give talent closer proximity to childcare. So we just need to think about those things a little bit differently. From an intangible culture perspective, creating an environment where people feel deeply connected. And I heard you say in the earlier panel, Deborah, it's about a feeling of belonging. You want to feel like this is your family, like your people is there, your sis is there. And we have to create that culture through representation, through creating safe spaces where people with similar lived experiences can come and share good things, bad things, mentor, and all of that. So that's really important. I also share from a talent acquisition perspective, inclusive recruiting is super important. It's not a one size fit all strategy or tactics when it comes to recruiting diverse talent. And so I'll highlight, the importance of removing bias in your recruiting process. Again, sounds like a no-brainer, but it's a matter of will and being very intentional in removing some of those systemic barriers through creating standard processes where there's clarity on the time frame for the interview and recruiting process. There's clarity on the number of interviews you're going to have. There's consistency in who you're interviewing with some customization so you see yourself represented, but we're not making it harder or different in having your diverse talent jump through all these hoops to prove themselves when others aren't. So that's really important. And the best way to fight unconscious bias is to acknowledge that it exists. You got to call a thing a thing. Sometimes, others around you may be experiencing microaggressions, and we talked about that in another panel, and you are not aware of that. So you need to invest in understanding what is unique, different, challenging about diverse talent that you need to, again, tailor that experience to, so you're removing some of those roadblocks and systemic barriers for attracting and retaining diverse talent.
That's awesome. You touched on a lot of things. Like, yes. But that acknowledging the biases and the microaggressions is important, especially with recruiters. And so if you're a manager, you may have to educate your recruiters. You may have to be very direct. And sometimes you may have to go through the resumes yourself to take another look. And I find myself doing that because I think it's important to make sure I find exactly what I'm looking for, but cut through a lot of that, not being seen, folks not being seen or not being ready. The other thing I wanted to make sure that we say to students is to apply for those internships. Don't be afraid to do so. I sense there is fear in the space about not being ready, but I assure you the others applying are not ready either. But they will get it. You can't get what you don't apply for. Like, ask not, get not. And so I've seen that too many times, and that therefore we have graduates who have no internships. So they and apply to the big companies and apply anywhere on the planet. Like, why do you have to stay where you are? So that comes from a military brat in me, and that you can move and thrive anywhere that you go. And the next point I wanted to make was about entry level, yes, but we also need to focus on the mid-level managers who are stuck or deciding to opt out of PR. And so they've made it through the entry level, they've made it to a manager position, but there is this glass ceiling, and sometimes I say a foot on their neck around getting to that next level. And so that there has to be some nurturing and support that happens for that level as well, because that is your pipeline to the C-suite. But if they opt out and there's opportunities that come about, they look back and there's no one there. There's no one there to promote to the next level. Well, not Black professionals. There are people there waiting, and it's not us. And so I just wanted to make that point. And then the hybrid working environments. Here's my thinking on that. One, if you work from home, turn on your camera, because they don't see you. Maybe they don't want to see you, but you would want to be seen. So you turn on your camera and go in the office and be seen, because a lot of what we've learned, some of us at my, I would say age level wisdom experience, a lot of what we learned by watching others. So perhaps our parents did not do PR, or they were not in corporate America, but we learned anyway. And we learned from what we saw. And so if you're sitting at home and you want a flexible schedule, you want to, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking to somebody here in this. Don't do it. Turn on your camera, go in the office and network with people. Look, meet as many people as you can. Make sure they know who you are, what your name is, and what your skill sets are. What is your elevator pitch for real? Those things are important. What can you say about yourself? What can you say about what you want to do or aspire to do? Let's talk about that. I love folks that come up to me in that way. Especially, I'm an executive, but I'm an introvert. So I could sit in a corner and be quite comfortable. But I know I have a responsibility to be out there and be seen. And I'm very cognizant of introverts. And I'll say this, I say this to my leadership team. Okay, I tell everybody after every town hall, okay, reach out to me directly. So, and they do. That's the extroverts. And then I say to my leadership team, who on your team should I get to know that's possibly an introvert that would never reach out to me? And I reach out to them and I get them on my calendar. So I offer that as just real time, this is what I'm doing kind of thing to make a difference. So any other parting comments here? This panel's been great. And any other comments that folks want to make?
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Tanisha. You know, I'm from the South, ladies first.
Eric's my buddy. One thing that I would also encourage is to not be afraid to think outside of the box, because there is definitely more than one way for us to tackle the solutions that the industry may need. So for example, and again, this is through the spirit of giving case studies around things that we've experienced that have worked during the pandemic, when the industry was definitely very, very focused on, we got to do something, and highly numbers focused, which is important. I had an opportunity to meet another CEO of a global agency, Zeno Group. And when we were being courted by many global agencies to acquire us, come on board. And in some of those cases, we felt, is this offer of acquisition only because right now you have to meet a certain quota and a number? So we were even more protective of the vision at the time. And as a result, meeting Barbie and I formed something, a strategic agency alliance that we now call Agency Allyship. And it's where two or more agencies come together and align in their unwavering, selfless advocacy, focused on fueling one another to push through and eliminate systemic barriers. And so through that agency allyship model, we committed together to nurture talent of color, promote talent of color across the organizations, provide integrated multicultural solutions to our partners and clients. And it also became a way for talent of color to actually decide to stay at both firms, because it provided people on our team the ability to work on business outside of what they had experience on. And for Zeno Group's world, they were very proud that their agency formed an alliance with a founder of color. And so I say all of this to say there's different ways and approaches to this, and challenge yourself to think out of the box to potentially create a solution. If it's not there, is there a new model of change? Is there a new model of collaboration that you can bring forth as a solution that's beyond the numbers, but really leaning on mentorship, advocacy, collaboration? And that's been something that has been one of the greatest joys of my career over the past 2 years. And we are now committed to providing this agency allyship models to other agencies to model with other founders of color.
Thank you. Thank you for your voice on that. And thank you for your contribution and being a Black-owned agency. That's awesome. And, I salute you for that. Eric, would you like to close out?
Sure. And just so congratulations to Nisha, to you and the Zeno Group. That is fantastic to hear. Congratulations to everybody here on this panel. Because, being Black in this industry, there's so much that we go through, we learn, we experience, and we overcome in the end, because we're still here, right? And our resistance through what goes on is really what fosters the joy for us to be where we are right now. Some of the things I wanted to make sure I left with this panel is just, when we think about, yes, everything that we shared today was great. And everything that was shared in this conversation with the PR Museum was great as well. But make sure, people don't just listen to what we said and no actions take place. So I really want, you take after this conversation, what are you going to do tomorrow or start to do tomorrow in moving our initiative forward to more representation? Are you going to find define a relationship with the HBCU communications program? Are you going to join their board of visitors and commit some dollars to their program so they have resources? Are you going to have an apprenticeship program or a leadership development program to solve for that middle management that Deborah talked about, to kind of help them kind of break through into the senior ranks, right? Are you going to look at some of your HR and talent policies today and asking yourself, do these make room for inclusion, equity, and growth of your talent of color and all your diverse talent, frankly, to be able to grow and thrive in your organization? What is your next step? What is your takeaway today? We heard the data, right? And I would love for us to take really thoughtful, intentional actions away or at least start thinking about that we want to implement and start to implement tomorrow to begin to move the needle forward. For our allies in the call, your advocacy is critical and vital. We have voices, and as one, like we can talk to each other all day, and we will continue to fight and push things forward from our end. But your voices and your space and and what you have is also important to making sure we move things forward as well. And so just wanted to kind of make sure I talk through that and share that in closing as well.
Thank you so much for that. Very powerful. I want everybody to be able to speak, but I want to make sure I introduce Tarad next. I want to bring him on. And we also are going to have a Q&A at the end. I have the pleasure of introducing Tarad. We go way back to Verizon. I don't want to mention years, but we do go back.
Yesterday.
Yes, yesterday. He has had top positions at Lenovo and at Verizon, and he's currently the Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications, Marketing, and Brand, and the Chief Communications Officer at Medtronic. I thank you for joining us and for making time to kind of wrap this up. You heard a lot, you've experienced a lot. Can you give us some words of wisdom around what to do next?
Yeah, it's been great to listen to this conversation. I appreciate the invitation and what the museum has done by making room for this discussion. And I appreciate a lot of the sentiments shared. I think they are similar to the way that I think I feel, even given where I sit today. But I'll say a couple things that I think are, some will be repeats of what we talked about, and some I think are encouragements that I have for us all. And the first is, I think, and someone said this in the last panel, it's okay to be frustrated. I think we all at different points in times feel the exact same thing and see the same thing and experience the same kinds of things, but it's not okay to be tired. And I think I was telling one of my teammates who's diverse earlier this week, that's the last thing we've got to avoid, taking us out, being tired. And we don't come from people who tire. And if you're tired, you got to figure out how to rejuvenate yourself, because this battle is long. And I think in some ways it depends on your perspective, but we are making progress. But there's more to be done. And I'll share a couple things. One of the things that I think I have come to in the last several years through the last couple of roles about this concept of DE&I, and again, balancing the frustration is some of this as well. And I really do fundamentally believe that we do not have a DE&I problem for our industry. What we have is a leadership problem. And I'll say this from where I sit today, reporting to the CEO, leading a team of 4,000 people, sitting in board meetings, that at the end of the day, the last mile for us in this issue is about leadership. Because we're doing the right things, beneath the line, if you will, pipeline and partnerships. And again, a lot of the great ideas that we talked about tonight, mentoring, it's happening. But for there to be system and structure change, we need the people who have the titles to execute on the power attached to the title. And those are two separate things. And I challenge my peers with this often. You can have a C title, but if you don't have power to change systems and structures, what good is a title? And so from a leadership perspective, I'll share a couple of things that for me practically about what I have tried to do to, one, take personal accountability for this as a leader, back to that leadership challenge, and to use what I believe is the power that I've been given to change systems and structures. And so two things for me personally that I began a couple years ago at Lenovo in terms of our agencies, which is where as brands we have power. And so we decided at that time, we put all of our agencies on notice and said, we will no longer give you dollars if you cannot show us a 5-year set of data.
Did you go on mute, Tarad? You're on mute.
5 years of data that you must show us around your recruitment and retention of diverse talent. And if you're an agency, we want to see the direct report team of your CEO outside the DE&I leader. If you can't, and if that data does not map to our internal corporate benchmarks for diversity, manager, director and above, women, you name it, then you can no longer take money from us. We will not pay you. And again, that's an example, I think, from a brand perspective, it's about leadership and using the power that you have. For me personally, diversity panels is another thing that happens a lot in our industry. And this has been for the last year. You will not often see me on a DE&I panel unless my peers and I who are on that panel commit to show up with your scorecard. And so if I'm going to sit on a panel, I want to bring my personal leadership scorecard to show you my performative data, what my team looks like, my direct reports, what my organization looks like. And I want everyone else on that panel to bring their scorecard. So if we're going to have this discussion, we're going to ground it in fact and whether we are bringing real power to our commitment and words to DE&I. And that's an example, again, where maybe you don't want me and that may be the outcome, right? And so you don't see me in a lot of these places and that may be that decision. But again, I think at the end of the day, this last mile is where we've got to have leaders who decide, I will show you what it means to be committed to this issue, because I'm tired of talking about it as well. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of the brand and agency relationship, and this is where back to the agency influence and driving for accountability. And this has really been in the last 6-7 months, back to the conversations and cleaning out our roster and really eliminating agencies that have not been able to deliver on our diversity data. There's also been a bit of focus on looking through our agency lineup and identifying where in those agencies we have partners that we can really align with. Shared recruitment, shared retention, shared staffing programs, where we're cycling interns and entry-level talent from our internal team to our agency team. And there's a rotation that we've created with some of our more strategic agencies to build and grow a pipeline for the agency and to ensure that our agency talent doesn't feel like the agency is the end of the road for them in terms of their careers. And so they come through both. And so that's something that we're trying, right, to see if it works, to try and build both long-term employees in the agency who are diverse, who see the value of a relationship with the client, not just doing busy work, but getting exposure, and then vice versa, challenging our teams to do that internally with brands as well. And the last point I'll make about truth to power, and again, using the role you have and the influence you have to do something, because we've got to make decisions to impact this where we are. So do what you can where you are until you have the ability to do more. And so I was in a conversation with an agency CEO a couple of months ago, and I really took him to task around what I believe to be words about DEI and a lack of pull through. But look at your direct report team and look at the team that I see as a client that you're presenting. But you tell me you're committed to this cause. And I described what his narrative felt like to me. The call ended. I got a call back the next day. He's upset. And it wasn't to me, it was actually to a counterpart of my man. This CEO is upset with you. He cannot believe you said that to him publicly. Now, never heard from him directly, but again, it was an example of large global agency has, a narrative around DE&I. We are paying them, but it was at that point around, okay, if I'm going to pay you, I'm not seeing what you're telling me you're delivering. And so we're going to end this here. And it was a shock. And I think, again, that's where we've got to get much more comfortable. And I'm hoping to bring my peers along as well in the C-suite who have that title. It's not shared yet by all of us, but I think in terms of using your power for where you are to do what you can, those are two examples I think of, again, leadership trying to drive good. But again, the last thing I'll leave you with, it's okay to be frustrated. We got to help each other not be tired because there's so much more we've got to do. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Deborah.
Oh, thank you for that, Tarad, and thank you for your leadership there. I can see where this is going to be best practice across the industry. And you can see in your speaking, we can hear how that's going to make a difference instantly, and hopefully can be sustainable change that drives more and more into the field and jobs being created for them. So thank you for that. I feel like I need a moment just to process everything that you said, but it felt wise and well thought out. So I know you've experienced it all and you're living it every day as well, and fighting the good fight. So thank you for that. So we want to open it up for questions. I have the panelists on. Our first panel can turn their cameras back on as well. I know there's a lot of chatter happening in the chat, and which I love. I also want to shout out to those helping the student who put a call out there, and people reaching out, that just touches me tremendously. So thank you, because that's what this is all about. Any questions that you would like to pose to the experts on the camera today on this call? As a minority in the PR and comms industry who is not Black, would love to hear about solutions to help keep our colleagues of color where they may not be getting promoted, but are just as talented and qualified as the majority of Blacks in our industry. Or folks, I said folks, I'm sorry, guys. My new contacts.
Deborah, this is Carmela. If I might offer a quick response to that, I'll say, now I'm coming at it again from the data perspective, where our benchmark report showed that 80% of promotions go to white people at every career level, not just entry level, but those who are in the senior most levels. And I will say there is no keeping someone who is not valued if their talents and what they can offer, if they're an asset to their organization, is not being recognized. And so earlier in the conversation, one of the comments and responses was that we need more diverse people at senior levels. They can't get there if they're not getting promoted, right? And then once they get there, they need to be just as supported and sponsored and mentored and respected as communications professionals to stay. So there is no keeping someone who is not feel valued. It doesn't matter what color they are. If they disengage because they don't feel that they are respected and included part of the team, it'll be a difficult feat. And it's why we continue to see folks leave the industry.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's another question about what can you do if your company isn't hiring, but you want to help?
I have one I'll share. I think now is a great time to seek out a mentor. There's a great podcast from Patrice Gordon on reverse mentorship. And if I misquoted her last name, I do apologize sincerely. She speaks most candidly in 7 minutes about the value of having conversations with folks that are more senior than you and vice versa. And how can we leverage the knowledge that we do share to help us continue growing our careers? So I would say, one, seek out a mentor immediately. And if not one, multiple. Consider building your own board of directors. Consider yourself your own company. What kind of skills do you need to build? What areas are you unfamiliar with? What areas do you want to know more about that you could seek guidance and mentorship and insight from a peer or more senior leader? And I personally have found those conversations to be not only like life-giving personally, but profoundly motivating professionally, especially when you're able to seek out the perspective of someone who's outside of your skill set or your own remit.
Thank you for that. The other question is, what can we do to prevent our young people from leaving after 3 to 5 years? I think we touched on this a bit, but does anybody want to weigh in?
Deborah, can I chime in the previous question and broach that question as well? I think it's really important to your company is not hiring right now, but your company may hire. And so what equity and relationships have you built when you're not hiring, right? I think a lot of times companies wait until, oh my gosh, I need talent. Where do I go? How do I get there? And there's no relationships established for them to be able to easily broach that challenge. And so I still challenge companies, even if you're not experiencing like a slow hiring period, to still do the work to foster relationships, not only with the talent, but with organizations. Like there's opportunities to work with different professional organizations to still network and connect and share best practices around what you're doing, what's working, but also how you can learn your organization take away as well. And to the second question that you shared.
How about keeping young folks at 3 to 5 years in? How do we keep them from leaving?
I'm going to go back to what I was saying about making sure we can articulate clearly and directly the career profile or the career journey we have for that talent. I feel like people sometimes may leave, they leave for a couple of reasons. One, bad managers, and two, not clarity around how they're going to grow in your organization. They can't see a future in your organization. They see that glass ceiling. And so if you can't articulate clearly and directly around what you see for growth for that talent, they'll likely get frustrated and want to leave.
And if I can piggyback on that really quickly, because I appreciated when you said that earlier, I think it goes two ways. The manager also has accountability to be able to support that success of that associate once they have communicated what's required to get where you need to go. The manager has an accountability to be educated on what is required and what is needed to support them in their success as well.
Thank you. There's a question about being promoted. What happens if you're not getting promoted to a senior position, and so you need to go and start your own firm? Tarad, do you mind responding to that?
Yeah, I think and someone said this recently, I think if you've expressed your desire, right, for career movement and what your next role is, which is that annual or semi-annual ongoing, performance conversation, and then it's still not happening, I think you've got to make a decision about, the place where you are. I had a mentor who a long time ago challenged me to think about, in relation to the role I was in and some frustration that I was having. She challenged me to think about, is this your place or is it a place? And if it's a place, why are you going to stay there if they're not allowing you to do what you desire to do? And I think sometimes we get stuck believing that because we're in a place, it is where we need to remain. And for us, I think a lot of times as diverse talent, sometimes the harder decision is to make that choice that, this is not my place. And it's clearly been made evident to me. After we've verbalized, here's what I'd like to do, and you've had that conversation and you've been forthright about it, and you feel like you've been, consistent, and it's not happening, we really got to make some harder decisions, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a question in the chat about a Black woman-owned entertainment PR, branding, publicity. They do it all. What are some tips for making it easier for her to get a meeting with the decision makers of creative companies and corporate brands?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can chime in on that from a 15-year journey. And what is that, Daria? Was that question from Daria?
Yeah,
I think that's the name. So I would say, Daria, a number of things. Number one, making sure that you have all of the certifications that many of the companies are looking for in reaching their supplier diversity goals, whether that's your WeBank certification, NMSDC, SBA. So knowing that you have those certifications and then meeting with the supplier diversity contacts within the organizations and asking them to support you in meeting the stakeholders. In addition to that, Tarad, the one thing I love about what you said is the power that comes from the client side. I can honestly say we would have never had an opportunity to work on a major brand, our first major client, if it wasn't for the client going to this particular global agency and saying, you have X amount of time and you have to be spending at least 10% of our contract value with a founder of color. And so that power coming from the client opened the door for our business. So I say, Daria, so understand too, what are the dynamics on the client side with some of the larger agency partners, and what type of supplier diversity goals must they meet in order to meet the demands of their clients. And then the last but not least is really understanding your power. So you have access to Black culture, you have access to this cultural competency, and our clients need to understand, how do we connect with the fastest growing demographic in the nation? And if the agencies do not look like the new face of America, that brings value to you. So really kind of working multiple angles at a time and being extremely persistent. And last but not least, I would say, being ready to be in the fight for the long term. I feel dreamers have to fight the giants that stand between them and that ultimate dream. And so being ready to really stay in the battle and just, day after day, go at it. So I hope that helped, and feel free to reach out to me if you want additional assistance on my LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like we just don't get tired. Tarad's message, don't get tired, keep fighting the fight. Thank you. Thank you all. I see there's still questions coming in, but we are out of time. But I want to thank you for the time that you've given us this evening and for this great conversation. I do feel like we've heard solutions. Now we need the right people who can make change from where they sit, to make those changes. Do what you can from where you sit, and that's from Tarad. So thank you for that. Kayla is going to come on and close out the program.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been our 8th annual Black PR History event. As always, it's one of our favorite events of the entire diversity series. All of you participants out in the audience, you saw how much rich narrative and career-long wisdom that our panelists and our wonderful host, Deborah, brought to tonight's event. Since we weren't able to get to the fireside chats, you guys will get links to them in the post show from Barry Spector. And we look forward to all of you following along on socials, the Museum of PR on Twitter and PR Museum on Instagram. And we look forward to the next diversity series. So again, a round of applause for Deborah and everybody else involved. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, and have a great night.
All right. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.